This is Steve Zeltzer with Workweek in Pacifica, and we have covered the struggle of the people, the community, and workers of Hunters Point Bayview to protect their health and safety over many decades. And part of this struggle has been to prove scientifically that the workers and community members who live in this area are actually being contaminated. And we've covered many hearings, many events where people have struggled to get the truth out about what's going on and get responsibility and accountability by government agencies which are supposed to be responsible for protecting the health and safety of the community and workers, including OSHA, Cal OSHA and federal OSHA. And there have been some new developments in this whole struggle because of the investigation of Dr. Ahimsa Sumchai, who is with the Biomedical Center Monitoring Unit, which has been established, an independent unit. And she's released some studies, and also there is going to be accountability, and she's been fighting for this her life as a physician and as a resident here, and also the daughter of a longshore worker here in San Francisco. So welcome to our show.
Oh, thank you so much. It's good to be back with you, and it is good to be speaking with you at a time when there are a number of important issues, legal issues that are going to be driving things forward and helping protect the safety of residents and workers at the Hunters Point Naval Shipyard.
And this monitoring center actually was established because of the refusal of government agencies, including the Department of Public Health, federal Navy, and others, to look at what was going on with this site. Why don't you talk about this site and why your struggle to have monitoring was critical to get this evidence released?
The Hunters Point Community Biomonitoring Program launched in 2019. And at the time that we launched, and today, we remain the first human biomonitoring program that is independent and community-based. And you are correct, the work we're doing is the work that should be done by the Department of Public Health and the California Department of Public Health. Specifically, the California Department of Public Health is charged with radiological issues at the federal superfund site under federal superfund law. And there is a biomonitoring program in the state of California, and there is a national biomonitoring program. The CDC administers a biomonitoring program. And they are not involved in our work. They are not supportive of our work in general, although in the last year we have made some inroads with getting the San Francisco Department of Public Health to be more responsive to the needs of people who obviously are being exposed. One of the driving factors in the establishment of the Hunters Point Biomonitoring Program was the encyclopedia of epidemiological data that showed that people are being exposed. I'm a former physician specialist with the Department of Public Health, and the most important medical experience that I bring to this work is that I was the coordinator for the Veterans Administration Toxic Registry, or environmental registry. At the time, in 1997, it was called the Persian Gulf Agent Orange Ionizing Radiation Registry. And at that time, that was the 30th commemoration of the Vietnam Tet Offensive. So I was seeing a lot of the vets from the Vietnam era, many of whom were mentally ill and had been exposed to Agent Orange, and there was a lot of question around what was causing Persian Gulf syndrome, and it was believed to be due to exposure to depleted uranium that was being used in tanks and munitions because of its density. So I had the ability to screen the urine of Persian Gulf vets specifically, to test for the isotope of uranium. And the most significant experience, just in terms of its extraordinary human impact, was meeting with the atomic vets, the vets who had survived Operation Crossroads and the atomic, testing that occurred in the post-World War II era. And that was a big issue for me because the atomic vets, unlike many of the other vets that I saw, were intact. I mean, these guys were psychologically intact, and they knew what happened, and they would come in and give you the same story, the same mind-blowing story, that they were, on board a ship, a support ship, and in 1946, in the South Pacific, there were two 20-kiloton plutonium bombs that were exploded. And these bombs were deliberately exploded to see what the effect would be of this type of detonation on a fleet of ships. And it was devastating. And, many of these ships, approximately 100, were brought back to the Hunters Point Naval Shipyard. One of them, the USS Independence, was docked at the gantry crane, that iconic gantry crane that is a landmark for the shipyard that everyone has seen. It's a major landmark in San Francisco. It was docked there for several years as a, radiation kind of laboratory, kind of imagine exploratorium at the shipyard, where you just, come on in and, here's your, your ship that survived or, is here despite the fact that it was exposed to two 20-kiloton plutonium bombs. So, we are talking about a community that is exposed. The evidence of diseases that are linked to environmental exposures is clear. The health department statistics on preventable emergency department visits and preventable hospitalizations is due primarily to diseases that are cardiopulmonary in nature. And then the inordinate incidences of cancer have been a focus of attention, so much so that the San Francisco Department of Public Health no longer publishes cancer incidence rates by zip code in the city and county of San Francisco. They rely on the Greater Bay Area Cancer Registry, which looks at the Greater Bay Area and kind of, zooms out so that you're not seeing some of the differences that you would see if you were, looking very, very closely at a neighborhood and a specific census tracts like we do.
And the issue of the contamination, a radioactive nuclear dump, really, which is Hunters Point Shipyard and Treasure Island, where they trained naval personnel on how to deal with a nuclear war, and they were contaminated. It seems the health department, you're saying, is not really interested in tracking that and even doing testing on the residents who may have been contaminated, who for years have said that they're been poisoned, they've got illnesses, they've got cancers. This seems to be a conscious cover-up of what's really going on right here in Hunters Point and Treasure Island.
Well, in 2004, when the shipyard Parcel A was transferred to the city and county of San Francisco, I attended all of the hearings related to that transfer. I was a elected member of the Hunters Point Shipyard Restoration Advisory Board, and I had founded the radiological subcommittee in 2001, and I contributed toward the publication of the shipyard's historical radiological assessment. That's like the Bible of radiological operations at the shipyard from 1939 to 2003. And when the health department approved the transfer, they adopted Article 31, which was ultimately adopted as an ordinance. It's a law. And under Article 31, the Health Department receives funds via the developer, Lennar Five Point. It goes through an office that has replaced the redevelopment agency. But the Health Department does receive revenue for earth-moving activities at a federal Superfund site, and it was recognized at that time that this was a conflict of interest. And then in 2010, there was a civil grand jury report that once again affirmed the conflict of interest in the backdrop of emails that were obtained via a FOIA Act that showed communications between the Health Department and the EPA representative, Mark Ruperta, and the developer, in which they were discussing ways to minimize the effects of the dust that was being generated that was known to contain asbestos. So the Department of Public Health has, a conflict of interest. And at this point, there has been so much legal action and evidence of human exposure that, these key parties are culpable. They're very, very culpable. So they really don't have a way, I think, to back out of what's going on. The Navy is faced with 6 lawsuits in which it is specifically named with regard to the cleanup. There are 12 lawsuits. That's according to the Navy JAG. They acknowledge that there are 12 lawsuits. And several of those lawsuits are going forward in the coming year. One of the most powerful lawsuits is the lawsuit brought by the San Francisco Police Department. The police were cited on the shipyard in one of the most dangerous regions of the base, the eastern adjacent area, and they were cited in a building 606 that was constructed on the footprint of a radioactive laundry, and more significantly, building 606 is here. That's the original footprint, but even more significantly, the police officers were sited in this building adjacent to this area here. It looks like a triangle. It's called the Triangle region. This is where the Navy staged the most radioactive dirt from Parcel E2 and Parcel E. The green areas here are areas that are designated radiologically impacted. Radiologically impacted is a polite euphemism for radiation contaminated. And these soils have chemicals that are 10 times higher in remediation levels. That's how concentrated they are. And this staging area is again where the Navy was staging the most radiation contaminated dirt, and the police officers were right here. So that's why, just based on the police officers' legal records in Kevin Abbey et al. Versus United States of America, Department of the Navy, constructed a cancer cluster within building 606. And, again, this is information that is in the lawsuit, is in the public domain as a result of the Chronicle coverage. And the police officers have, among, I think it was about 300 officers, they had 2 brain cancer cases, which is already outside of statistical, probability for a population that's small. Thyroid cancer, lung cancer, prostate, and very significantly, German Shepherd service animals who died and were diagnosed with cancer. There's one German Shepherd service animal that underwent surgery, and its spleen was full of a cancer called sarcoma that in canines is induced by exposure to ionizing radiation. So that case is going to be moving forward in the coming year. And then the issues that are facing the UCSF workers and the fence line residents. These are people who are dangerously exposed. You've used the term, criminal. This is, I believe, conduct that rises to criminal negligence and public endangerment, and I've used that term several times. But the fact that the landfill here is being actively excavated, and you've got workers here and you've got people living. This is Fitch Street. This is a city street right here. This line that demarcates the federal property on a Superfund site, from a dense neighborhood that's got about 23,000 people. And the pins here represent the radioactive biomarkers that have been detected in people, living in the area. And the pattern is very clear, just in looking at the pins. Most of them are concentrated along the corridor of entry to the shipyard and the radiation laboratories. The Naval Radiological Defense Laboratories were sited along Crisp Road, and then also along the fence line adjacent to the landfill. So that's, the basic pattern of distribution that you're seeing with the geospatial mapping. The Navy's own documents identify, that these cancer risks are incredibly high. Cancer risk for people exposed to the landfill's gases are about, 1 in 10,000 if you're a worker. And for people living along the fence line, if they are exposed to these gases or to groundwater, then you've got cancer rates that are as high as 5 in 1,000, which is just astounding. And that's essentially what we're seeing. And I must say that, that our findings do not disagree in any way with the findings of the Navy and the Environmental Protection Agency. The areas where the Navy, and this is a Tetra Tech map. Tetra Tech is that corporation that got into a lot of trouble that's being sued.
They were supposed to clean it up, and
Right.
workers at Tetra Tech, who are radiological cleanup experts,
Right.
said that they weren't doing proper testing, they were falsifying the tests, and as a result of that, 2 managers went to prison.
Yes.
Tetra Tech also was hired by East Palestine, Norfolk Southern, to do
Right.
testing after that catastrophe.
Yes.
And also Dr. Ray Tompkins was trying to do testing as to how they were excavating the material, and do test about the fact there was no oversight and real preventive care for people that were in that area.
Right. Yes. So again, all of the green areas represent regions of the base that are radiologically impacted. And as you can see, it's most of the shoreline. And that's understandable, because if you dock 100 ships that have been exposed to plutonium bombs, if you excavate a landfill, and this isn't the only landfill, there are landfills up here also. And most of this is landfill. This shoreline was built out, as landfill. And, our findings, again, are perfectly consistent with, what the Navy and the EPA identify as being, the regions of the base that are most contaminated. Those are the regions of the base that we're finding people who are most contaminated.
Well, the city was aware of the dangers, radiological dangers, yet Mayor Willie Brown, the politicians here, said it's okay to locate the police training school here on Hunters Point Shipyard. And also the University of California Medical Center have a animal center here. They've been told about the dangers, and their workers have been getting them contaminated and gotten sick, and they've been fighting for their workers' compensation at the same time.
Of course. And again, this is Building 830. This is where the UCSF workers are located. When the Naval Radiological Defense Laboratories were operating from about 1946 to 1969, they were sited in this campus. It's the 800 series building. So 815 is that big six-story windowless building that's, again, a very iconic structure.
That was the radiological laboratory.
Yeah, they consolidated in about 1955. They consolidated most of their laboratory administration teaching facilities into Building 815. And then Building 830 and 831, where the UCSF workers are now located, those were animal kennels. And when NRDL closed in 1969, in 1970, the Navy sold the building to UCSF. Now, in all fairness to UCSF, again, it is the medical school where I trained and graduated. The Navy has a very, very clear history of misrepresenting the extent of contamination of the property. You see that all the time if you go back in history. So in 1970, when the Navy sold buildings 830 and 831 to the university, it's possible that a lot of the radiological history wasn't known, because when I was a member of the RAB, elected in 2000, much of the radiological history of the shipyard was being declassified and released into the public domain. But what would have been evident to the university is that there is a landfill here. There is no question that, there's a landfill here. The Navy obtains permission from the Department of Toxic Substances Control to release the contents of the landfill. When it gets hot, it gets really hot in Baby Hunters Point, those subsurface pockets of landfill gas, methane and carbon dioxide and volatile organic compounds, and the entourage effect, when those gases rise to the top, they drag along with them all of the ugly stuff in the landfill. So radionuclides, heavy metals, debris, all of that gets, raised to the top. It's called an entourage effect. And the Navy's landfill gas monitoring shows that, especially in the hot summer months, the methane pockets can be as high as 60% volume in air or greater. The air monitors around the UC compound registered methane levels that were, higher than that. That is flammable, explosive, suffocating concentrations, in addition to the fact, that methane is a major global warming gas. So the fact that, the Navy is allowed to release the contents in front of these workers and within feet of people living on this the fence line, that should be something that everyone in this city should be concerned about, and it certainly helps us understand why we're seeing so much evidence of exposure in people living within the half-mile, perimeter of the base in general, and the landfill in specific.
And there was even a fire here that went on for a month.
Well, longer than a month. It was, it ignited on August 16, 2000, and then it took them 48 hours to extinguish it, because it sounds like they approached it as a routine fire and not a chemical fire. So it took them 48 hours to extinguish it, and then it reignited on the 24th, and then smoldered underground for, possibly months, because, the Navy just stopped talking about it, after a while. So, we had to trust their reports, but we do know that it smoldered. It probably smoldered for a couple of months.
And the city and county of San Francisco, the state of California, the federal government, were aware that this was a radiological nuclear site.
Yes.
There's no question about that.
There's no question. And again, when the Hunters Point Shipyard was put on the federal superfund list in 1989, that's called the National Priorities List. It had a hazard ranking score assigned by the EPA that was 80 overall and 100 for groundwater migration. What that means is that there was an 80 to 100% risk that the people and workers would be exposed to contaminants from this property when it was put on the federal Superfund list. As a comparison of the thousands of federal Superfund sites that there are in the country, the average EPA hazard ranking score is 50. So, the shipyard was one of the most contaminated properties in the nation, and it certainly was the site of the premier radiation laboratory, in the post-World War II era, that was operating at a time when the Atomic Energy, Commission was in its embryonic stages, had no teeth, and, they were literally throwing radioactive, spaghetti on the wall. It's just abhorrent, some of the animal experimentation that was done. There was an experiment where they fed radioactive potassium to quote unquote healthy muscular volunteers, which I interpret as African American men, fed them radioactive potassium to see what impact it would have.
So they were actually testing the black workers here, the shipyard workers.
That is certainly what is suggested. They, identify in this particular research, which is referenced in the historical radiological assessment, all 3 volumes of which are in the next room. They, I don't identify, the race, but given that era, and who else is going to volunteer? And these are probably workers who were recruited.
And they weren't told about the dangers.
Probably not. We know from the plutonium experimentations that were, going on, that, people were being exposed and they weren't, notified. There's actually a really famous case of a UCSF patient who was believed to be dying of cancer, who was secretly exposed to plutonium, and they found out that the diagnosis was wrong. He didn't have cancer, but he did, survive, and they did, test him, and they were looking at body burdens of, people who were being exposed to plutonium. So, we're at the point now where we are, continuing to do the biomonitoring screenings. I hope that you'll have an opportunity to talk with Dr. James Dahlgren, who has been a real lifesaver, for us, because he came and did the 24-hour speciated urinary screens where you're looking specifically at radioisotopes. When I do my screening, and this is the screening kit, this gives me the element. So it will detect uranium, strontium, cesium, thallium, but it's not telling me if I get a high uranium level. Is this uranium, 235? Is this uranium, 238? And what Dr. Dahlgren was able to do with his screenings was specifically determine what radioisotopes are being detected. And he was able to detect radioisotopes of plutonium. Plutonium is a man-made radioisotope. It's actually made over in UC Berkeley by a Nobel Prize winner, Seaborg, and it is not naturally occurring, so you can't go to Mars and, get exposed to plutonium. In fact, there are few places on planet Earth where you can be exposed to plutonium and have it in high concentrations in your body. We have a lady, and her partner who are living here along the fence line, and this woman has 2 different radioisotopes of plutonium in her urine in high concentrations, including one, plutonium-244. It has a half-life of 82 million years, and it is a product of nuclear fission. The only way you can be exposed to it is if you have been exposed to nuclear waste from plutonium bomb. That's the only way you can have this in your body. And in addition, she has elevations in all of the progeny of uranium, and her total uranium level is sky high. It's like 4 times higher than allowable, as if uranium is okay to have in your body, as if there's a normal, level of, uranium to have in your body. So I make this point because we have had some astute students who have interviewed us, and one of the questions they ask is this just from fallout? Is this cesium and uranium and plutonium, is this just from atmospheric fallout from all of the atomic weapons testing? And the point that I want to emphasize is that no, it's not. This is not fallout level. This is 4 times higher total uranium than would be allowable. And again, these are toxic elements. They don't have any beneficial role in human physiology or metabolism. They are damaging. They will reduce your life expectancy, and they will lead to disease. And we have people as young as 3 and 12 years old with heavy metals like tungsten. Tungsten is a heavy metal alloy that is highly, heat resistant and has high tensile strength. It's used in the aerospace and defense industry. It's got the shipyard's fingerprints all over it, and we've got a 3-year-old white boy, with high levels of tungsten in his urine, and we've got a 12-year-old black boy with concentrations of tungsten that are toxic. That's what we're seeing. We are just seeing results that are astounding, and the fact that we have been doing this for, we're entering, our 5th year, and we're just starting, to get the attention of the people who are responsible. Is I think that's utterly amazing.
And there was a hearing, the Board of Supervisors, Matt Haney, had a hearing about what's going on here at Hunters Point and Treasure Island, and it was asked why the Department of Health, Public Health in San Francisco, under Mayor London Breed, did not do any investigations, did not do any surveys, did not do any testing of the residents and workers in this area. And they said they didn't know why. It just wasn't happening.
Right. And again, they have the funds. That Article 31 that I referenced, that allows the Department of Public Health to get, money from the developer for the earth-moving activities that are occurring on a federal Superfund site. Those funds can be used for testing and for community oversight, and they're not doing it for obvious reasons. They have an investment in the development of the shipyard. I don't want to go into all of the corruption that has gone into the shipyard's development. You and I have talked about it a number of times, and we can reference our listeners to the encyclopedia
Over and over again.
Right. So we've talked about it. There are just very, very powerful forces, including people in elected office. I think that one of the people who should be pressured most is Governor Gavin Newsom, because I know that he is repressing these state agencies. When I tried to contact the California Department of Public Health about our findings, I gave them the findings. I gave them to Dr. Tomas Aragon. Tomas Aragon was the city's health officer. He was one of the first people I met with when I wanted to establish the biomonitoring program. So they have the information, and I was speaking to a representative from the California Department of Public Health about the situation with the workers. It's just so alarming. And he made this comment. He said, well, you can't prove it. Like, whose side are you on? Whose side are you on? So, that's the kind of response that we've received in the past. The good news is that we have people who've taken very, very courageous actions. You know, the police officers lawsuit is going to be going forward in the coming year. The UCSF workers in their personal injury, work actions are being looked at, very, very carefully. And then one of the things that you'll be interested in, sharing with your listening audience is that, to the best of my knowledge, 15 of the most dangerously exposed residents living in this area, most of them live within 4 blocks of the base. And again, this is 3rd Street right here. The major corridor, a major street in San Francisco, is within half mile. It's 6 blocks from this street here. But about 15 residents and workers have filed federal tort claim actions, personal injury actions, and the Navy JAG will have to, respond to that. And again, these are people with risk, evidence of exposure, proof of exposure, and many of them have secondary adverse health effects.
And this has been going on for decades. Health and safety issues, illnesses
Yes.
are not new in this community.
Yes.
Asthma, all kinds of health problems in
Right.
this community. Yet the politicians, the agencies that are supposed to be responsible for protecting public and workers, like OSHA, Cal OSHA, and the head of Cal OSHA just resigned. They have less than 200 inspectors for 18 million workers in California.
Goodness.
It seems like there's a conscious effort to do damage control for employers or the Navy or other agencies and not
Right.
really protect the people and workers of California.
Yes, it's true. Now, in all fairness, it is important to point out the complexities of domain here. This is federal property across the street from city, municipal property, and then you got state agencies with some oversight responsibilities. So it's really easy to, pass the buck or to say, well, that's not my job, or, this isn't my area. The reality is that the people that we are documenting who are most exposed are people who live in the city and county of San Francisco. And the buck stops with the city and county of San Francisco. The Navy, however, is the federal agency that is responsible for the federal superfund site. The Navy does not have sovereign immunity. That's another point that needs to be emphasized, because people in the neighborhood have sort of been told that the Navy can do anything that they want. And they certainly act like they can do anything they want. They've got sovereign immunity. No, they don't. The Navy has qualified immunity. That means that, they can do as much as they want until they hurt someone, until they have been documented to engage in negligence and, public endangerment and cause personal injury. Then their position becomes one of, qualified immunity, and that's why they are being sued over the Tetra Tech soil fraud, because even though Tetra Tech was their contractor, they're ultimately responsible. It's their, property, and that's why they have to pay attention to 15 people who have filed federal tort claims, who have evidence of exposure as a result of their negligence. It is most important for us to emphasize that the dividing line between this dangerously contaminated radiation, contaminated methane-producing landfill and these city streets that are within 6 blocks of a major corridor in San Francisco is a chain metal fence that doesn't even have dust curtains on it. And that is the situation, of course, that people are seeing also at Treasure Island, where there's some belief, some magical thinking that because we've got a chain metal fence here, that people aren't going to be exposed to radioactive fugitive dust emissions and deep soil excavations and heavy equipment operations.
And that was done, it seems, without testing. I was out there, I saw big mounds of dirt, no testers, nobody testing. There was a public school there that was closed
Right.
because people were getting sick. There's a charter school there. I mean, children were getting
Right.
that contamination.
Of course, yes. I have tested a few people on Treasure Island. I tested a woman who astounded me. She came in with symptoms that looked like a military burn pit exposure. And in researching her, I found out that there was in Hunters Point a military burn pit in this region of the shoreline, but there are burn pits on Treasure Island, just like the military burn pits in Afghanistan, where they just throw in ammunitions and diesel fuel and other waste, human waste and debris, and just burn it into the air. So she was walking along the shoreline of Treasure Island with her dog. This is an older woman who's disabled. And all of a sudden, her face got red and her eyes teared up, and, her face started to swell, and all of the areas of her body that were exposed. She had a heavy sweater on. She described the windy conditions that, people often describe on the base. And almost everything that was exposed got red and swollen. And she contacted me. It's the first time I've ever been contacted to do this work emergently. She wanted to come in immediately. And I screened her, and she did have toxins that were identified that are similar to what we're seeing in Hunters Point. But I reported to her supervisor that I had evaluated someone on Treasure Island who, in my expert opinion, again, I had been for a year in charge of the VA toxic registry, who came in and looked like a military burns pit exposure. That's so mind-blowing to me. I'm not a spring chicken doctor. I'll be 72, this year. I graduated from medical school in 1981, and I still have experiences at the shipyard that are utterly, unbelievable.
And the whole effort to privatize, turn over these military facilities to developers, it's not unique to Hunters Point or Treasure Island. They're going on around the country, the brownfield sites where they agree that the developer will clean up these sites.
Right.
And therefore, they turn them over to developers who then don't clean up the sites.
Right.
Downey toxic dump in Downey, California is another example, military industrial complex. It seems like this is an epidemic of problems for people, community people, workers who go on these sites and then can get contaminated, and even fighting for their health care is a real crisis.
Right.
For these workers. And in the case of the UC workers, UCSF workers, I mean, they had a whole fight to just get their workers' compensation. I mean, what is going on with even getting provided the medical care for their sickness, which is a direct result of where they were?
Yeah, well, it comes down to the fact that establishing, proof and causation is the major.
And that's liability. In other words,
Right.
these companies and others don't want to have liability.
Of course.
So they say there has to be direct cause of this incident.
Yes, and that's why the work we're doing is so important, because we're coming so close to establishing a direct cause and effect that it becomes, difficult, to dismiss our findings. And I am proud that, the work that we are doing has helped the UC workers. I want the work that we're doing to help the Hunters Point residents, and we are establishing a toxic registry. We've got the mappings that you're aware of, but the work that we've done to help elucidate what the UCSF, workers are being exposed to and what they're experiencing, I think has been most valuable. And in some ways, the Navy has just made it so easy because there is so much documentation that's available about the characterization of the base, like this base-wide impaction map that was created for the Navy by Tetra Tech, and then we just overlay, the heavy metals and cancer-causing chemicals that we are detecting. But workers are also easy to study in that, they are stationary. It's a small population. There are only about 30 of them. So, if someone gets cancer, like one of the workers who witnessed the Navy release the landfill, and this year he underwent surgery for colon cancer at age 55, that's significant. If you've got, 3 workers, in addition to John Miranda, there are 2 other workers who have respiratory symptoms. That's statistically significant for a population, of 30 people. John Miranda, I know that you're going to be speaking with him. I'm really proud of John. John is, kind of a shy guy. He doesn't talk a lot, but he has persevered. His record as a loyal worker is so pristine. This is a guy, again, who worked while a landfill, a chemical fire, was blazing, in front of his compound. This is a man who, drove an old truck, got up at 5 in the morning and, drove this old truck to work on a federal superfund site. And that truck has been scanned, and it has both high gamma wave activity and particle activity. The gamma waves are probably coming from, radium-226 and cesium, and there are other gamma emitters, and then particle emissions. Plutonium, one of the most dangerous radionuclides on the base, is an alpha emitter. It turns out his truck is going to be a powerful piece of evidence, and I actually have the thumb drive that contains some of the readings that were taken independently of the building, as well as the trucks. The workers had already reported Parcel E2 dust being on their vehicles and around the compound, and the university had independently tested the outside and inside of the buildings and had detected multiple radio isotopes in concentrations above background.
And John is a member of CWA UPTE, Union Professional and Technical Employees. Mm-hmm. They're AFSCME members who work at that facility. Catherine Liebarger, who is the president of AFSCME Local 3299 and also president of the California AFL-CIO. It represents workers all over California. Mm-hmm. It seems that those unions have not taken up this issue.
Without question, they haven't. And you and I spoke to your audience a couple of years ago about the removal of the Proposition 65 warning sign from the fence. There was a Proposition 65 warning sign that legally had to be posted because of the risk of asbestos exposure from the soils. It's known that asbestos is in these soils. It turned into a workplace issue, and someone just took it down. So those kind of actions, your OSHA, both state and federal, should be responding to. Those kind of actions are just, that's over the top.
And the San Francisco Labor Council had a hearing on what was going on at the shipyard.
Is that right?
and I attended it, and there was somebody from the Navy there, the Department of Public Health, and I asked at that meeting, had there been testing of the individuals who live there and the workers? No answer.
Right.
And it turns out that Lennar gave $500,000 in a grant for education to the San Francisco Labor Council.
Yes, that's how it works.
So the developer actually paid money to the San Francisco Labor Council to go along with his development because there are going to be jobs
Yes.
in Hunters Point Shipyard.
Yes,
Is
that's
that
how it
what
works.
they?
Without question. In fact, the body, the Hunters Point Shipyard Citizens Advisory Committee that meets to discuss the reuse of the shipyard, this body is funded by Lennar Five Point, and they kind of masquerade as a quasi-governmental entity, but they are funded by the developer.
And another issue is the grand jury reports. You mentioned there was one earlier, 2010,
Yes.
but there was also one last year
Yes.
around the rising tides and the effect that that's going to have on the community where they're going to be developing, actually.
Of course, that addressed groundwater as well as sea level rise. And I mentioned earlier in our interview today that the Navy documents that exposure to groundwater for these residents can, the risk of groundwater exposure can is associated with a cancer risk as high as 5 in 1,000. The other thing that I want to point out is the resident who lives here, I referenced her earlier, who has the plutonium radioisotopes and the total uranium that's so high. She is a disabled vet tech. She's a credible witness, and she's had, I think, about 7, maybe more, animal companions who have died of cancer. Obvious, like orbital cancers and, head and neck kind of cancers. And she has photographed and witnessed dead raccoons in her area. And that's understandable. If these animals are drinking this water, especially water that's being excavated and groundwater, rises to the surface. The landfill, if the Navy releases the landfill, that means that the groundwater also gets released into the atmosphere. So, that can also explain, some of the animal deaths that this particular resident is witnessed, as well as, the deaths of the service animals that the police officers document in their lawsuit.
Now, one of the things that we've learned from the East Palestine train wreck is that the EPA, which is supposed to be in charge of the environment, actually allowed Norfolk Southern to be in charge of what was going on there. And that people were getting sick. They were not being informed of the dangers, the burn-off of those toxins. And also now there's a campaign to say that the EPA and Biden should be declaring that an emergency site, national emergency site, so all the people in the community and workers can get health care as a result of their contamination and poisoning.
Of course.
Is the same thing applicable to Hunters Point Shipyard in Treasure Island?
Yes, those kinds of incidents they're mass casualty incidents, and they are regional disasters. I actually, I declared a disaster in the area. I went to the Board of Supervisors, and the authority invested in me as the local health officer. There's nobody else, who's, doing this based on the detection of radioactivity in residents. There is a state law that says that you must declare this a disaster area. So I did, and the district supervisor tried to shut me down, but I did it, to protect myself. I mean, you just can't know that someone is being exposed to nuclear waste if you are, licensed and a professional person and do nothing. And I had already notified the National Response Center. EPA has a National Response Center. So after we were detecting plutonium, then I felt obliged to do that. plutonium is 100% specific for the Hunters Point Shipyard. I mean, you can write off the arsenic that we've detected in concentrations, 7 times higher than toxic. You can write off the tungsten. You can write off the uranium that we detected in a worker that was 17 times higher than allowable. But there is no place else in San Francisco, and again, few places in the known universe where you can get multiple radioisotopes of plutonium detected in your body in high concentrations. So plutonium was, the bright yellow line, I guess they call it. That was the detection that really fortified the work that we are doing and made it crystal clear to me that the work that we are doing is very, very credible and very authentic and has to be taken seriously. And the fact that no one else is coming in to try to verify our work, that's
That it sounds.
yeah, really. I mean, if you think that we're not doing anything, then just come on in and, prove otherwise. But they know. This makes sense. Again, the people who have radiation in their bodies are living in areas that the Navy and the EPA say are radiation contaminated. There is no argument here. Our findings fully corroborate the findings of the Navy and the EPA. Most of this clustering, as you can see, is within 6 blocks of the base, and it is encircling the source of exposure. That's another point that I should make in closing. As a result of the mapping, that is a new experience for me as a doctor, the geospatial mapping and some of the digital science that I've been introduced to. I've looked at cancer clusters around the country. When we detected the breast cancer necklace, that's that circular cluster of women diagnosed with breast cancer who are mostly living within 6 blocks of the base, and it surrounds the landfill. I looked on Google for other circular cancer clusters, and there are about 2 or 3 in the country, and in all of them, at the center of a circular cancer cluster is a landfill or a toxic or a toxic dump. But the point I was trying to make is that there are other clusters where people are exposed to a waterborne toxin, and there you don't see anything really specific. You see something, that's more diffuse. In many ways, it was a godsend to us that our geospatial mapping identified the source of the exposure. It's around the front gate to the shipyard. It is the corridor of entry to a radiation laboratory. And again, it's a perverse blessing, but it was a godsend that the geospatial mapping clustered around the source of exposure. The cluster is next door to the landfill, and that just made life so much easier for us in that regard.
And the other issue is the attack on people who are doing investigating and trying to discredit them, even trying to take their licenses away.
Mm-hmm.
And this has happened to you. And
Yes.
why don't you talk about what happened to you and why there was an effort to shut you down, basically?
Well, the medical board investigation into my license was coincident, almost exactly coincident with the filing of the legal injunction by the Hunters Point community lawsuit. And over 2021, there was a investigation that occurred during the expert witness deposition process for the Hunters Point community lawsuit. I was deposed as an expert witness, and the investigation was opened during the exact time frame, of the expert witness deposition process. And
Who opened that investigation?
well, it was opened by the Department of Consumer Affairs. Governor Gavin Newsom's name is in the right-hand corner of the, of the initial documents that I received, and I am concerned that there are people in power at a state level who have a conflict of interest in the shipyard's development, who are trying, to undermine and discredit, the work that we're doing. But in summary, I don't want to go into it too much because no one seems to care.
Well, I mean, I find it highly suspicious. I find it highly suspicious. The one doctor
Right.
that's doing this investigation,
Yes.
doing these studies, then they start to challenge her license in the middle of this whole process?
Yes. And no one seems to care. I was named the UCSF Alumna of the Year in 2021 while I was being investigated. I have been interviewed by the New York Times, the Washington Post, Nova, PBS is going to be interviewing us in the coming weeks. No one seems to notice, and no one, seems to care. But the other point, I guess, that I would close with is in saying that, when you practice as long as I am, and when you're as old as I am, at some point you have to just throw down the towel and say, I'm willing to go down with this fight. I'm willing to just get down in the mud, and I'm willing to throw dirt, and I'm willing to fight back, and I'm willing to bite and scratch and do whatever I have to do, to protect this community and protect these workers and protect these people who are being exposed. And at this point, I don't have that much to lose, I think that we all get to a point in our life, particularly as we get older, where we start to prioritize the things that are important to us, the things that we want written on our epitaph, the things that we want people to talk about, when we're being eulogized. And this is one of the most important things that I've done in my life. I flew on a helicopter and landed on freeways at 3 in the morning and intubated people and, saved lives. And I worked in a refugee camp in the Horn of Africa that nobody else, wanted to, do work in. And, I have done a lot in my career. This is the most important work that I'm doing, and no one is going to stop me from doing this work. And the Medical Board of California, the Department of Justice, Governor Gavin Newsom, anyone else who has an interest, you can have it. You can have my license, but it's not going to stop me. This is evidence. It doesn't take my license to see this evidence. And there are people, again, the 15 people who have filed federal tort claims independent of me. They are out there, with their evidence of exposure and where they live and their photos of a fence line where the Navy is driving, heavy vehicles.
No testing, no testing.
Right. So again, it's disheartening, but the work is going to continue. And again, no one really seems to care that much. This is just information and data and legal evidence that you're not going to be able to just dismiss, no matter, what happens to me personally.
Okay, well, I want to thank you very much for joining us. We've been talking to Dr. Ahimsa Sumchai, and she is a physician, resident of Hunters Point, and has spent her life really fighting for health care for the residents and workers, and is continuing that fight and is actually getting the evidence to take this fight forward. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.